Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is all around employee engagement, leading people through change. The BTN is delighted to bring this to you in partnership with Glint. As much as the current climate has presented many challenges for organisations, it has always opened up a variety of opportunities for companies to revolutionise the way they operate and for employees to engage with leadership and fellow employees in a whole new way. I'll now hand over to Ritu Mohanka, VP of Strategy and Business Development at Glint, who will be hosting the session.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ritu Mohanka, and I lead business development and strategy at Glint for EMEA. Today, I'm joined by Pia-Maria from Nets Group. I'm really excited about it. Pia-Maria is a really passionate OD professional from Finland. She has about more than 15 years of experience in people and organizational development. She now is the HR development partner at Nets Group, supporting HR colleagues and leaders in driving engagement, culture, and behavior change and performance at Nets Group. Pia-Maria, without further ado, I'd love to hand the floor to you to share your story of employee engagement and how Nets Group is leading people through change. Over to you.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Ritu. Huge pleasure to being here with you today, and I'm very happy to be able to share our story. So let's get into it. So just a few words about us as a company to begin with, because that's also we are kind of linking back to that also on the different changes that we've done and why we've done this. So first of all, we are a company that operates in the payment industry. We offer different payment solutions for both merchants and banks and corporates. And our purpose, what we hope to do, is to make life as easy as possible. So we hope that we can provide services and payment services to our customers so that their customer experience is as easy and seamless and secure as possible. And if we then look apart from our business area and where we what our products are, also look a bit into the transformation that we've gone through during the past years. So actually, as a brand, as Nets brand, we are a fairly fresh, a new company. We launched the name Nets in 2010, so only 10 years ago. But actually, we have a history that goes far beyond that. So the starting point for us as a company has been especially in Denmark and Norway, and national companies that operated in the payment scheme. That then merged together in 2010 when Nets as a brand started. And then from there forward, our journey has been to build on from there. So first of all, having the approach of conquering Nordics, getting more companies to the Nets family, starting with Finland and then being more present in Sweden and so forth. And from there forward, the last years has actually been then to drive this forward into Europe. So we define ourselves today as a European company and have also presence then in many different markets. So this of course has been a huge change for us. At the same time, there are also many other transformations that we have been going through. So first of all, the whole industry is probably one of the industries one of the industries that changes the fastest, with a lot of competition coming in. Of course, also then forcing everyone in the field then to look on how to what they are doing and what type of services they are providing and so forth. But this has also then affected us in our ownership structure. So being first a bank-owned company, then being private equity owned, at some point being stock listed, then being again private equity owned. So also many transformations on the ownership structure. Today we are 4,000 people operating across Europe. And if we then go more into the subjects of today and looking into on what the transformation we have been going through and how that looks, this transformation that I just shared is actually what has been our guiding star on kind of how we work with different concepts. So of course, kind of thinking about topics like engagement, it could be an easy solution to look into what other companies are doing, and then just deciding from there forward that we also need to do that and starting the journey. But actually, our journey started a few years ago already, where we realized that we need to, when going from bank owned and becoming more commercial, that we needed to change our culture. So already 5 years ago, we defined that empowerment and customer-driven are the key words for us, and attributes that we really need to ensure that we instill in the organization and that we work towards. And that started then the change journey for us. So we started up with redefining our values. ACT stands for accountable, customer-driven, and together, and that's actually those ingredients that play along in all of the design that we have then done from there in you could say the people space. From there forward, we wanted to look into on what type of leadership do we need to be able to ensure that people can act on their own, and very much this empowerment was something that drove also the type of leadership that we wanted, going to much more coaching style of leadership, for example. We put quite a lot of time and effort and energy into the wordings and wordsmithing on values and leadership model, and we're very proud about the end result. But at the end of the game, those basically are nice words on paper if you don't then put them into practice. So from there forward, what we really try to do is to change our habits and change the way we do things to ensure that we actually can act in our day-to-day work, and also that leaders can follow the leadership model. We early on we realized that leadership is the key driver for us. So we worked a lot with strengthening our leadership, and provided trainings and so forth for our leaders in that. But then from there forward, the areas that I'm touching upon today is then the bigger kind of transformational drivers in terms of changing the way we operated. So first of all, changing our performance management concept, and then driving then an engagement strategy that focused on continuous feedback. And if we start with looking a bit on the performance management change, because that's actually something that's been the huge change for us, and something that has also driven our continuous learning approach, continuous listening approach. Here you can see shortly summed up on what our change in this field has been. So we went from being a very traditional, having a very traditional performance management setup, to completely changing this and wanting to instead drive performance growth and engagement. And we decided also to ditch the term performance management and talking about impact today, which really is about driving these things. So process-wise, what we've done is to install flexible priorities. And actually, the reason for all in all starting with this change on top of driving our culture came from the business. So of course, kind of realizing that we need to be faster. We also looked into on how can we change our people processes that also support this change. So having flexible priorities and being able to change focus during the year was really important for us. At the key of, or at the core of this process, what we really feel is most important is the ongoing checking dialogues. So that is kind of the most important ingredient, you could say, in our model, and they are actually employee driven. So we are saying that the employees are in the driver's seat. So instead of leaders doing it, it's the employees. So they are the ones owning the agenda. They are the ones coming to the meeting and talking about on what they are focusing on now, what support they would need, putting up topics that they want to discuss on where they feel that they would like to have some coaching or support from their leader, and together then finding solutions from there forward. And then the last kind of process point of view was then putting in calibrations instead of ratings. From a process point of view, even though these were kind of a big change and also a huge leap of faith, going from a quite traditional controlled manner into something that was very, very loosely defined, but very much focused on principles. I would say that the even bigger change is, of course, the behaviors that we want to drive with this. And this is something that has also been a key learning from us throughout, that the key principles and the behaviors is the most important to target. The process is just a side product of that, and to make that happen. So So finding ways then through this process of ensuring that people can have more flexibility in what they focus on and how they work with that, but also ensuring that when we, for example, discuss topics, that we don't look backwards, but we look forwards. So providing also tools, for example, for employees and leaders on how to frame those discussions. What is most important to discuss right now, and how can we ensure that we are forward focused. The employee-driven approach was a huge cultural change, something that we are continuously working on. It doesn't go overnight, so it takes some years. And of course, that made a huge change for employees, but it also made a huge change for leaders, because going from much more leader or manager-driven than to stepping back and taking the coaching approach is of course a big change. And then all the time having this continuous improvement mindset on kind of when we discuss, it's not about that much on where we are today, but rather on kind of how can we become better from here. So already from the beginning, we had some cornerstones that we were very inspired of. So Daniel Pink's drive and Carol Dweck's growth mindset that also then we put into the concepts and into the principles, and we want to drive forward. So, but basically, this is our current performance management setup, and it's in its own, it's driving continuous dialogues and ensuring that people can focus on what is important right now. It's not a system approach in that sense. We don't have a system, but we very much trust the high quality dialogues that people are having. But then going forward into the topic then of working with engagement, the natural next step for us from having shifted our performance management approach was then to go into looking at on how do we then work with engagement. And this work started with really again defining on what is actually the key principles, what is important for us to achieve, what is then the key principles and the behaviors that we want to achieve through working with engagement. We did this work 2017, 2018, and then in the beginning of 2018, we had gone through these key principles with our senior management and aligned on them, and then decided on our survey vendor and started the cooperation with Glint. I will just share a few words about the key principles, because those are actually quite important for us on how we are driving this. So of course, being in the financial industry, focusing on numbers is of course natural. That comes very natural in our thinking. And we realize that that's not necessarily, when we think about engagement, that's not necessarily the only approach on working with that, and not perhaps the approach that we see is going in our favor. So we wanted to shift the focus to instead think about on how can we drive engagement, how can we only use the insights from the surveys as a starting point, and then from there forward, starting with the real work on that. So what this meant was, first of all, having a lot of discussions also internally on what is actually engagement, realizing and talking with management also that that's only the outcome. What is more important to look at is the key drivers that is affecting that outcome. And then also when creating our engagement strategy, also then realizing that actually for us, what is a really important driver is to ensure that people can give feedback, that they have a voice, that they can make an impact. And that then also affected the setup that we wanted. So to ensure that we have the opportunity to continuously listen to our employees on what's important right now and what to focus on. Another angle that we also wanted to target was to ensure that we go from this individual survey focus to having a data insight. So we before going into this, the setup where we were that we had many different type of surveys. We had cultural surveys and engagement surveys and many different things. And we often ended up in the discussion also with management. So what does this really mean? And how do we get this result from this survey and this result from this? So how do they compare? And we didn't really have the answers to those very important questions. So we wanted to have a setup where we actually can look across the data and also use utilize the data from different survey angles to be able to get a more a better overview and understand the matter from different perspectives. And then lastly, I think one of probably the most important on driving engagement is then going from being very HR led in this, seeing that engagement is a HR topic that the HR community can take care of, to then empowering the leaders to work with this. So when we decided on what type of tool we want, it was really important for us that it provides the help for the leaders. It's not that important on what we get in HR, but the leaders are actually the ones who are working with it. So they should be empowered on being able to look for insights themselves, have the tools in terms of how to drive actions and get ideas on best practices and so forth. So those were also important drivers for us. Then when we started with our cooperation with Glint, we then quite quickly then decided on the service setup. We have today 4 surveys a year, so we decided that quarterly is a good pace for us to ensure that we have a continuous listening strategy. And we are then also decided that there are actually different things happening during the year, so perhaps we should angle our surveys to support that cadence and look into on when do we need a different type of information. And with that, that led us to then decide that we have one yearly bigger engagement survey, which we just finalized now in May, with actually this year 35 questions, a bit too much for my taste, but we are in the middle of also looking into some further strategies. So we wanted also to include more questions now, and then we'll test out on what are important questions to continue with. And that's the survey that we are working on right now. Then we have 2 shorter pulse surveys, which typically are around 12 questions, which is more to see on how are we doing right now, what is the current word on the street, but then also have the opportunity to see on how we are progressing with those matters that we have previously set up as actions. But then also, depending on where we are during the year, there might be some topic that is important to target, especially during that time frame. So giving the opportunity for that. And then deciding separately to have a leadership effectiveness survey, which we run in November. And this is a survey to give the individual leaders also direct feedback to them. So it's kind of with a bit different focus than the engagement surveys. It's directly directed at the immediate leader and how they can work with the feedback from the employees. On top of this, we also have now very recently actually started with our life cycle surveys, also done in cooperation with Glint, and in the same dashboard, so we can look at surveys across. We have now an onboarding survey, and then we have an exit survey. And we are very much looking forward then when we have collected a bit more data that we can look across also these surveys and understand a bit more the employee experience in the different points in the life cycle of an employee, and understand on how does it feel when you join, how does it feel after 6 months, and also to be able to target on kind of when people are leaving, when do we start to see signals in the engagement data that points to that's now it's a critical time, and we need to act on this. So that's basically our service setup. I wanted to also share a few highlights or kind of key learnings from us on working now with these you could say cultural change drivers that we've been doing now for the last years. And I think what goes for both these bigger initiatives, what's been really important has been the close cooperation with key stakeholders and management. I think a key learning for us, and something we need to also to work going forward on, is that we did quite a lot of work in the beginning to ensure that we are aligned, and we talked a lot and we defined together and so forth, and believe that, or we felt that we really are on the same page. But then, of course, kind of being in a lot of transformation, it means also that people around us also change, and new stakeholders come in. And this is an area that we need to target also going forward on how do we keep up this kind of connection and ensure that when new people are joining on how they also then can realize the importance of what we are doing, and of course also then giving input on how we should change going forward. I think this concept of going from number focus to continuously driving engagement is super hard. It's something that we need to focus on all the time, and it's also realizing that for us in HR also, it doesn't come by itself. So it's very tempting and very easy to report always on, these are the results from the survey, and this is the many points we've gone up, or whatever is that we are talking about, and then kind of realize that we should shift also that communication to more talk about the insights and the stories behind it, that kind of also to support actually these key principles that we put forward. Perhaps one additional learning that I would like to share at this point also, I think that it's important to really focus in on key principles and keeping it as simple as possible, but then also looking into on how do you want these key principles to live in the system that you are creating. When we started with performance management, employee driven was kind of really important for us, and still is, and we believe that that's the right way to do it. But that also actually drove a lot of the actions, or how we implemented it. So, for example, when we implemented or when we started with the trainings, we decided that all trainings should actually be together for employees and leaders, because we are not separating people anymore. This is an employee-driven process, and we want to also position it as something shared. I think with hindsight, it could have been kind of, given our maturity at that point on only being at the start of this journey, it could have made sense to rather start up with ensuring enough support for both employees and leaders. And what does this mean? Not necessarily training from the start altogether, but perhaps kind of taking small steps at a way to get to that point. There was also an interesting point when we communicated that, as it is you who are in the driver's seat, you own the agenda. But we also said that also you as an employee, you could be the one booking the meeting, and we didn't realize on kind of what that created, and that was something that we received a lot of feedback on. And also in some instances, it, for example, led to that in the operations field, employees had to learn first on how to use the booking system of meetings, because kind of they had never done that before. So some of these things were perhaps a bit too we took it too far for driving it, but still kind of being very focused on the principles, I think has been important for us. So if we then go forward, looking into on kind of where are we now, and kind of what has happened then during the last half year, and probably this year has been strange for everyone across the globe. For us, I would say this has been quite a tough year, and I would say that's kind of what we realize is that in these moments of crisis, it's where you really test on kind of, do you really follow those principles that you have put up, or is it just words on paper? So we started the year with going through a downsizing process. And we were actually supposed to launch our pulse survey exactly at the same time as our downsizing process. So of course there was a discussion on that, so what should we do, and what is the right approach, and going from to be honest with having concerns also on what does kind of how does the numbers look like, and can we do this, but then thankfully realizing that of course, I mean, now as ever, it's important to collect feedback, and we should continue. We slightly changed the timing of the survey to ensure that people get it's kind of a week after, so that they have received the news, and then we can get the information on how they are doing right now and how we can support them. We did receive feedback on it, and also actually from employees, some employees saying that's kind of why are we doing this, and this is kind of what are we expecting, and so forth. So having to repeat also then that's kind of now I mean, in these sort of situations, it's more important than ever to understand how our employees are doing, and collecting the feedback and repeating that it's not about the numbers, but it's about really understanding and listening and working with engagement. So that was the first hurdle during the year, and then of course we, as everyone else, were hit by COVID-19. Again, set into a new reality, and we took quite big precautions from the start. So we decided to split up the whole company into different teams to ensure that we we secure both employees and also the continuity of the business. And we were only allowed 2 weeks at a time then, depending on which team you belong to the office to support this. We then from there transferred into actually everyone almost working from home. So we have had 95% throughout of the employees working from home. And of course, then again, faced with the question on, okay, so what does that mean and how does that function? And for leaders also being in the new reality of everyone being virtually, and how do I then know on what's actually happening and are people working and so forth. So again, rereading the message about trusting and empowering and using the tools that we had in place in terms of check-ins and staying connected with employees on how they are doing. Survey-wise, we also had then the big engagement survey coming up right at the time when everyone were at home. This time we actually didn't receive too many questions or comments on why launching right now. I think we managed to take care of that when in the first part of the year, and decided that let's go anyhow forward with our survey timing, because we need feedback and we want to hear on how things are going. And we also want to hear, especially for the COVID situation, on top of our regular engagements, input on how things are going. So we did some slight changes or additions to the survey, and then decided or then launched as originally planned. And just sharing some, and now these are I realize very much numbers, but sharing some insights on from this survey. I think again, kind of this provide in hindsight also a good rationale for why it makes sense for us to continuously listen and also continue with the approach during moments of crisis. So what we could learn in the engagement survey is that we are actually going again back upwards on our engagement trend. So we had, of course, naturally a quite significant drop in the beginning of the year due to the downsizing, and now we are back again on the upward trend. And I realized afterwards that if we hadn't done, for example, the survey in February, we actually would probably have interpreted the data completely differently and wrongly, because we could have seen that there's a slight decrease from last year, and then looking into, okay, so that must be people are now with the different things and things are going downward. But then being able to look at the data from different data points, seeing on that this is actually not true, but we are rather moving in the right direction. We can also see now in the survey results that we are very happy with increasing in those areas that really matter to us. So working with these things like empowerment, feedback, challenge status quo, and so forth, which we have decided on to work on. That we are on a very nice level and continuously increasing that. But it has taken quite a long time. So that's also the learning for us, that it doesn't go overnight. Here also a snapshot on kind of seeing, we included a question about productivity, also to support with the business leaders, also to understand on how people actually have viewed on how productive they've been. And we actually were very positively surprised that most people actually felt that they've been more productive, or many have felt that they've been more productive during working from home. Whereas again, many also kept on the same level. So of course, then this also highlights the importance then of taking the learnings from this moment in time and thinking about how can we ensure some of these practices also going forward when we return more to normal. I think actually with this slide and these words, I would sum up our story and give over to you, Ritu.
Great. So thank you so much, Pia-Maria. That was such a inspirational story. I'm just going to quickly summarize some of the key takeaways that I take away from your story. Nets Group has done a phenomenal job moving from a traditional approach to an agile approach. And I love how you say that you really moved from simply measuring to driving engagement. It isn't about a single survey, siloed survey focus, but really moving into insights. And drawing upon different programs and sites across rather than looking at one survey at a time. The second thing that the biggest takeaway I take from here is how you're putting employees and managers in the driver's seat. That's such a critical thing, giving them ownership to drive what's important to them in an organization. That's so critical. And then I know besides the COVID-19, Nets Group has gone through so much change in the last year or so. So how important feedback becomes during these times of change and how much you've maximized that to the organization's benefit, but also to the employees' benefit. You've really taken this approach of getting continuous feedback, responding to employees' needs, but also course correcting where it's required to. And in times of distress, right now with COVID-19, you've really taken some invaluable feedback and understanding what your employees need when, and shifting the organization's focus based on what your employees need. So that's fascinating. And you know, we of course at Glint have collected a huge amount of data in the last several weeks. You know, looked at 1 million plus responses, and we're seeing very similar patterns from our data. Most contrary to what many of us had thought, that you know, responses are not going to be very positive, people are going to be very concerned. We're seeing quite the contrary of that. We're seeing overall responses are relatively positive. And there is a number of thoughts that goes why that might be. And I'm thinking, you know, are people genuinely doing a good job, or are people scared a little bit of some of the negative things in case they're worried about losing their job? Some of the key highlights from sort of our database in terms of what we've seen from our data that I'd like to highlight is that you can all see from the screen that a lot of employees are feeling a really positive perception in terms of communicate. You know, organizations are, you know, reacting really well in times of crisis. They're taking really good precautions. They're caring about employees' well-being. One of the lowest scoring items, which is actually still quite high, is around sort of the connection piece, as you mentioned as well, Pia-Maria. You know, the sense of connection between colleagues and employees at this stage is becoming, you know, sort of one thing that we're seeing that employees are quite concerned about. And one of the things Glint's most famous for is its narrative intelligence, as you know, Pia-Maria, from your surveys and programs. Our natural language processing looks at the entirety of comments and help group these topics, comments into topics, and then shows the sentiments of how this topic is most spoken about, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. And then finally, how these topics are connected together, which is really critical. So not in its isolation, but how is culture connected to employee recognition and so forth. And so when we take a peek at sort of the last several weeks data, the 1 million responses that we've so far collected, we're seeing that employees are talking, you know, sort of how they're talking from a open comments perspective. Sort of the 3 key themes are emerging. One is around, of course, communications, remote working, and then infrastructure and tools. And these probably aren't big surprises to anyone. It probably resonates with you as well, Pia-Maria, in terms of what you're seeing in your data. In times of uncertainty and stress, employees seek out for more information and they want more communication. So some of the more positively mentioned communication styles are things like, you know, how companies have dealt with consolidated location of, you know, sort of sharing information. You know, multiple sources and opportunities to hear information from the organization. And then also helping local managers, empowering them to reinforce key communications as well. From a remote working perspective and a positive, we're seeing, you know, how the organization and the companies are providing tools to help employees shift to home office. That's been so important at the outbreak. And then, of course, there are some sort of negative perceptions related to challenges with childcare and balancing other home duties. That's sort of such a, you know, suddenly such a shift from working from the office. As you said, 90% or more people are working from home now. So that's a real sort of shift we're seeing. And then from finally, the last emerging trend around sort of tools and infrastructure, there's, you know, usual concerns around VPN concerns, home networking challenges, which we see a lot of organizations say right now. So as you can see, employees are feeling very positive about some of the cultural aspects, cultural characteristics like pride and support and vision and belonging, and quite sort of negative about staffing, workload, and burnout. And as I said previously, no surprise to anyone, it's sort of very sort of natural for employees to feel sort of concerned about some of these things. But you know, the most important thing here is how organizations are really taking advantage of showing that in the face of adversity, we are going to behave in a way that, you know, these topics demonstrate like our values and our reaffirms our culture and our long-term commitment to our employees. I mean, that's why we see such great and positive scores or comments around pride and some of the cultural characteristics. And then on the sort of the negative side, of course, when we see topics like workload, staffing, the burnout topic, you know, sort of that dynamic is really one that I personally think is really interesting. And I think it really has to do with the anxiety folks feel on the pressure of one, working from home and the pressures of home, and then as well as continue to be productive. So it's good news to see some of your productivity data in terms of perceptions of employees, that they still feel they're being rather productive. But as the situation changes and we see sort of employee feedback and critical information for leaders and companies evolving, I think today organizations are likely to find a path forward in three sort of key broad phases as Glint defines them. Respond, recover, and reimagine. The difficulty in this journey is that it's not linear. The complexities of modern businesses and the challenge at hand, the fact that we don't have a vaccine for the virus yet, mean that organizations won't be able to sort of neatly move from respond phase through recover and into reimagine. In the immediate aftermath of the outbreak, just exactly as Nets Group did, when we suddenly shifted focus to both remote work and the concept of essential workers, employee surface needs around communication, infrastructure, and tools. Then when organizations on those organizations on the road to recovery, we found it critical to keep sort of the pulse of the employee feelings. You could carry it on with your engagement survey, because of course we wanted to make sure that we kept a pulse on employees' feelings, particularly around safety. And are they prepared? Do they have what they need? And these topics really addressed employee concerns around and expectations around personal safety, sort of the long-term flexibility, work flexibility, and then sort of related issues related to that. And of course, the pandemic has forced so many organizations to sort of slam on the brakes and sort of start. And several months in, we're now seeing leaders really have the opportunity to ask themselves, if we were to pivot, whether it's strategy A or strategy B quickly, how do we want to be sort of different in this new world? What changes have we made now that we want to actually keep going in the long run? But whatever it is, here's where the path forward gets really clear. No matter the phase, whether you're in respond, recover, reimagine, organizations can successfully adapt and even improve by sort of relying on, from our perspective, 5 core people-centric habits. Just exactly as you're doing, Pia-Maria, frequently gathering employee feedback on critical topics and changing topics as necessary. Equipping managers with insights. So it's not about data, but really providing them with the insights. Having regular, sort of dialogue and team meeting and one-on-one conversations. Checking in on goals. Do we need to course correct? Do we need to reprioritize? And then finally learning from some of this input in a way that improves organizational and both individual success. So that's sort of a quick summary. I am keen to ask you some questions now, Pia-Maria. You've really shared an amazing story around your transformation, both from a performance perspective and an engagement perspective. You've gone through so much stakeholder involvement in this process of transition. Talk to us a little bit about what hurdles did you overcome whilst you were going through this change from 2017 to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks Ritu, and thanks for a great question. And just to pinpoint also, I mean, I think that we are on a continuous journey, so we still have a lot to learn and a lot to develop. So we are definitely not there yet, and I don't know if you ever can get there. But kind of working with stakeholders, as I mentioned, I think one first learning has been that we need to do that continuously. So it isn't enough with just doing it at the start, but continuously ensuring also new stakeholders that get on board, that they are also involved. Another thing that I think that we learn is that we actually started with trying out to set up continuous surveys already earlier in 2015. And basically kind of in hindsight realized that we hadn't done our homework. So we started up with quite kind of we felt that in HR that's a great approach. We should do that. It's important to listen and quickly discuss that with management, but didn't really align on that. And then we started, and then realized after a couple of surveys that we weren't actually at all ready for that. So we had to stop that, and it actually took some years to get back to that. So I think really doing the homework in terms of what is really the business need that is driving this change. Why do we need it, and what are the kind of the key drivers and the behaviors that we need, and then be able to kind of support that, because then of course then it's much easier to talk about it and why it's important and so forth. Then it's kind of a more fun. It's just good to listen to our employees. I think also another thing that something that we have quite recently realized, and I think that we want to do even more going forward, is to also make it interesting. So to kind of ensure that people are curious about the results. So it's poking their interest, and really they want to deep dive into what is the stories behind it. So also finding those interesting links between different survey points, being able to kind of reflect back on perhaps different key outcomes that we otherwise are measuring as a company, and just finding interesting stories. So for example, looking at we now look at data on how does it then look when people, those who are having check-ins regularly, those who are not yet having, on how does that affect, for example, then the engagement, or if we look at our leaders and who have gone through our different leadership programs, so what is the effect of that? And then of course, very importantly, on zooming in on those that are doing a great job. So what is it actually that they are doing to be able to provide that back to also the organization? So kind of playing with the curiosity and making people want more and feeling intrigued by the data. I think that's something that we want to do even more going forward.
Yeah, I think you've kind of sort of almost answering my question, but just as a follow-on question from that. So what are your top 3 aspirations? Where do you go from here now, given that you've got your performance philosophy in place, you've got your pulses in place, leadership effectiveness, you've done lots of work around times in distress. Where do you see your engagement strategy evolving from here?
Well, basically, I have to say that it's quite going to the basics. So actually ensuring that we do the things that we talk about that we are doing. So we just had our engagement survey. So what we really need to do now is zoom in on looking into the insights and actually working with it. We, for example, one of our business areas have started a campaign on one step forward. So realizing that it doesn't always require, or it shouldn't perhaps be positioned as a huge change process, but rather kind of working also continuously with it, and just taking those small steps forward, and then realizing and identifying them, and then being able to take the next step from there. What we also are doing, and this is still kind of just ensuring that the basics in place, is that to investigate on what do our leaders need. So we are currently collecting data from our leaders on how are they working with engagement, and how do they feel about working with engagement, and what are the areas that they feel they need more support on. So we can then answer on those things going forward, and basically it's quite basic things also that we want to support, or we need to support them in a better way in terms of how they work with the data, and different things around that. I think also, as I mentioned, the onboarding and exit is a quite new thing. So really learning on how we can use that data insights and what that tells about employee experience is important. But then I think also the last point is also to looking at from here forward on does it kind of also reviewing the service setup as we have, and the cadence that we have. That is this the right one for us from here forward to eternity, or should we do some changes to it? We have, for example, received suggestions that how about if we rather have still on a quarterly basis, but focus on certain topics for each quarter, that we could then work on very focusedly on those from there forward, with a bit different concept that we have today. So I think that's something that we need to investigate on what works for us from here forward.
Yeah, continuous stakeholder management, constantly reviewing what you're doing, what's working, what's not working. That so makes sense. One question more sort of for the audience, who I'm sure they've taken away lots of advice, but what are the sort of the top hints, tip, advice you'd give to other HR peers that are beginning to start adopting the sort of journey on moving from traditional approach to a more agile approach and of measuring engagement and driving engagement?
I think, from our learnings, I think what I would recommend is really to take a deep look on what is your business need for this. What is kind of why is it important? What is important in it? What are the key drivers that you need to work on? And from there, then find the ways on how. So doing that background work first. I think probably this moment in time with having been hit by the crisis worldwide, it's probably a good point in time to evaluate what we're doing, because now I think everyone understands that we can't trust on that things work just as they usually do, but things can happen. So I think that there's probably a place right now to have those discussions on what should we do going forward, but not just kind of ride on that, but at the same time also reflect back on what is really important for us and why should we do that. And then involving stakeholders as much as possible into the process. And I think also just being testing out. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do a huge shebang or changing everything at the once, but taking small steps, testing out how that functions and learn from there, and then take the next step.
That makes a lot of sense. There's one question from the audience, which perhaps maybe I'll take. How often would you recommend companies surveying right now? I think you've heard Pia-Maria say it herself, in times of change and crisis, checking in with employees is absolutely critical. To an extent, it really depends on your company feedback culture. If you have a feedback culture and if you collect data regularly, then just add a couple of questions. How are you doing? How are people feeling? What do you need right now? For those organizations who haven't been in sort of the practice of surveying and employee feedback, our recommendation is do something. It doesn't have to be in the form of a survey necessarily, but check in, whether it's through one-on-one conversations and other medium, but make sure you check in with your employees, because at times of distress, the one thing we can do is grow sort of the connection, the sense of connection between employees and colleagues in the organization. One final question, Pia-Maria, maybe perhaps if you don't mind taking this from the audience, from the data you've seen, maybe perhaps what are you sort of one or two things you're doing well in these difficult times?
Well, I think we've been lucky in the sense that we installed something like continuous dialogues and check-ins before being hit by this situation. So I think that has worked in our favor. So as you shared, we have the same feeling in Nets. That's, I mean, the feeling of connection is of course super important, and that's something that people are feeling that they would like to have more of course, working remotely and not meeting at the office. So I think those though having in place something like check-ins where you can naturally connect with your leader, and then for example also with peers, and talking about what's really important. I think that's been something that has worked in our favor, and something we will absolutely continue with also.
Yeah, and just to add to that, some of the things we are seeing is more regular check-ins, exactly as Pia-Maria said, or it doesn't have to be a long pulse with hundreds of questions. We actually advise less is more. So maybe 5 to 6 questions. The most is checking in, depending on the period you are in, within the sort of this phase of respond, recover, reimagine. Wherever you are in your journey, make sure you constantly check in and course correct where necessary. On that note, I'd like to really thank you, Pia-Maria, for sharing an inspirational story, but also for your partnership over the years. We really, really value that. And thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. Pia-Maria, any final words from yourself?
No, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk about our story, and thanks everyone for also listening.
Thank you.